Okay, hi everyone. Thank you all for being here. We'll get started. I think we've been having a really fun morning. We had some great science. We had excellent invited speakers. Thank you, everyone. But I'm really excited about this session because this is our special session for this specific research day. We haven't done this before. We are interrupting our day for a very specific session which we wanted to do in view of what the year has been in this past year. So welcome to the Future of Research in Academic Medical Centers, a crystal ball session. So what we're going to do today is we will look ahead. Imagine what academic research might look like in year 2035 and beyond. We know that the next decade is going to bring in big changes in funding, technology, collaboration, how we train future scientists. A lot of those are here with us right now. So this session is meant to explore. We can't say we'll predict with certainty, but we'll try to explore and see where we are heading. So really, we have a lot of questions for the next decade in academic research. How will discovery, collaboration, and training evolve? What will we define as success in the next era of academic medicine? Will that change? How will we prepare our institution? And most importantly, when we look back from 2035, which is 10 years, but as time goes very quickly, we want to say, did we get it right at Emory University, Emory Healthcare, in our Department of Medicine? So we have speakers here who are thought leaders in research for our Emory Healthcare and Emory University. And what I requested them was to give us some predictions. We asked each panelist to share one prediction about the future of research, one challenge, the most formidable, because we know we have lots of challenges, and an opportunity for innovation and impact. We'll follow this by a moderated discussion and audience question and answer, so be ready for that. And the 4 lenses we'll try to cover today, I'm not sure we'll be able to cover all of them, is going to be research ecosystem and funding landscape, training and mentoring of future investigators, which is very important, and we definitely will cover that, inclusion and global collaboration, and the influence of AI and emerging technologies. So we are going to be ready for our crystal ball prediction soon, but I want to first introduce our esteemed guests here. We have Dr. Kristy Murray, Chief Research Officer of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Dr. Adam Marcus, Senior Associate Dean for Research for Emory School of Medicine, Dr. Guido Silvestri, Vice President for Basic and Translational Research for Woodruff Health Science Center, and Dr. Venkat Narayan, who is the Executive Director for Emory Global Diabetes Research Center. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you taking your time here and being with us. So we'll start off with the predictions, and I have requested each of the panelists to give me their slides, so we have their slides. I'll put up the slides, and Kristy, if you want to go over your predictions, and then we'll go down the line. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So it was, when I was thinking about my prediction, I was thinking more near future instead of far future, just because I feel like we've been in such a state of chaos. And I think, too, when I was putting this slide together, it was when Hurricane Melissa was starting to bear down and hit as an incredibly strong, historic Category 5 hurricane onto Jamaica. And just by show of hands, how many of you have been through a hurricane before? Okay. I still have PTSD from the times that I've been through 2 big hurricanes, and so I think that was part of it, as I was just having that on my mind of what it's like to be in a hurricane and get through it, and how scary it can be at the time, and so I think a lot of my prediction was kind of as an analogy to going through a hurricane at the moment. I feel like what we've been experiencing over the past now are we at like 8 months of this craziness, has been exactly that, just a lot of chaos, emails coming out on Friday nights, spending the weekend in a flurry of trying to figure out what to do, how to prepare, how to react. And so I keep thinking that this has got to be just temporary, and I don't want to feel like I'm just a half glass full optimistic kind of person. I want to truly believe this, that we're going through these moments right now where it is chaos, it is destruction, but just knowing how, as mankind, we always progress somehow, some way. I want to believe that that's what's going to happen here as well. And so my prediction is that this is like a hurricane that's coming through, a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction. But one thing I experienced during hurricanes is that when it's all finally over and you come out of your house and you're looking and assessing the damage, you realize that you've got a whole community around you. You're surrounded by incredible people, incredible neighbors, everybody's emptying out their freezers, bringing out whatever meat's going to go bad because we have no electricity, and trying to come together as a community. And you see the calm skies and everything feels good outside. And then you just all bond together. And that's what I would like to believe is going to happen, is that we're going to be coming together as a community and we're going to rebuild together and move things forward.
Long, wonderful history of productive relationship with the federal government in supporting, basic foundational research that may be sort of lost in translation if we just focus too much on the lost in translation, no pun intended. if we focus too much on the on the entrepreneurial side of research. So this is to me the opportunity, right? If there's really a developing of a new landscape for academic biomedical research, being one of the first entrants, again, borrowing language from the business world, right? But being one of the first entrants into a new model could give us some significant, competitive advantage. And that might be what makes the difference in the, 10, 20 years from now. What will be the centers that have really capitalized on this, massive disruption that the current administration is bringing into the traditional model to innovate, in a way that is disruptive, for things that are inefficient and should be replaced, but also sustained over time in terms of finding this nice mix of quality, efficiency, teamwork that should increase our productivity and ultimately our impact, in reducing human suffering. So that's kind of what I see happening, and hopefully I'm not too wrong.
Thank you, Guido. I can see that you and David are probably feeling a lot of burden of this on your shoulders to get it right. So thank you for, and we're going to discuss a lot of these points in the discussions as we move forward, because there's a lot in here for us to talk about. Adam?
All right. So as a disclaimer, what I first wrote looked like I copied from Venkat, so I had to change it because I saw his slides. So we thought alike on some of this. But I kind of started with maybe the science and research first, and then kind of went to a larger view. So, and again, this is a little bit with a cancer lens on there, but I think it applies broadly as well. So the way I see some of the science and research evolving, we talk a lot about, in all our fields, precision medicine, and I think a lot about what we've learned and sort of the technologies that we've used. So our technologies have advanced us to essentially knowing a lot about individual cells, and at some point we'll know everything about every cell at some point. And I think the big question is, what are we going to do with that? What does that all mean, and how do we sort of drive new treatments, new prevention mechanisms around that? So in some ways, our technology is far ahead of our understanding. And maybe, AI could help bridge some of that gap in terms of integrating a lot of that information. So I imagine that there will be a time when we start thinking about precision medicine in sort of an ultra-precise way, that every treatment for every patient could be unique and could intercept a disease in different ways as it evolves over time. So I see us moving from precision medicine to ultra-precision medicine, if that's a word, that's adaptive really to the evolution of the disease. And that's something that to me is really fascinating. And then also from a bigger picture, I'm also thinking about how we shift from treatment to prevention. I know I see this a bit more in the cancer field, and I think there's tremendous opportunities when we think about all the research we're doing here. Wearables, I mean, cancer blood tests are rolling out now, screening and other approaches, working with our communities. Those to me seem like the biggest sort of shifts and changes that we really may start to see. I was at a talk and someone said, one of our leaders said, we're going to move from the Winship Cancer Institute to the Winship Prevention Institute. And it stuck with me, just thinking about those things, about how we sort of move in those directions. So I think there's challenges, right? Whether it's those specific examples or whether it's other examples. And I think one of the biggest things that we run into is, we create barriers to collaboration, right? And no one intentionally does this, but this arises due to a complex ecosystem. The other thing that I think a lot about is that when we put up our ideas of translation, we always think, basic to preclinical development, to, clinic and community. But in reality, it's not a linear process. It's really iterative. And that's what makes us special, and that's what makes us unique. And that sort of iterative translation model really only happens with collaboration and team science. And that, to me, is critically important. And then the last piece to this is a term that I'm not sure if I made it up or not, but it's called translational velocity. So I think the speed at which we move things forward, I think needs to improve. And I guess it's more velocity than it is speed, because it really needs to have a directionality to it. So we need to have translation under a strategic guidance and a plan in a certain direction where we don't all operate as individual labs. So I think we could improve our translational velocity as a university and probably nationally. So I think to do that, we really need to be more intentional about team science, and in my opinion, researchers follow the money. So I think we really need to incentivize further team science, have the downstream processes around that, whether it's tenure, promotion, indirects, all that needs to follow to ensure that it becomes a win-win. I think at some point we need to think about research as more of an ecosystem that integrates, Guido's talking about healthcare, right? And all that sort of data needs to be integrated. I think there are tremendous opportunities to do that, multi-omics, multi-scale data, more of a systems approach. And, I think obviously we need to plan for the future, think about what's emergent. And the last piece, and I'm not going to steal his thunder, but think about it in a disease agnostic way. I think that's really important, because I know in cancer we can learn a lot from the neuro people. We now have a diabetes cancer grant around, pilot grant program. So I think we just need to start thinking outside of diseases and what sort of common mechanisms are shared. That's it.
Thank you, Adam. I think as the biggest clinical department, which is also the biggest research portfolio in your medical school portfolio, the word translational velocity means a lot to us, because I think a lot of translation has to happen within these clinical departments. So thank you. We'll discuss this more as we go on. And last but not the least, Venkat.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's always easy to explain events backwards. And we've been asked to predict the future, which is dangerous. I mean, in a way, when you think of the future, it's some combination of data and our prior beliefs, the Bayesian model of prediction. So I think I want to declare that my beliefs are probably influencing what I'm going to say. But regardless, I'd like to think that I'm offering you some foundational thoughts here. It was about exactly 8 years ago when Vannevar Bush produced this report called Endless Frontiers. That was really a revolutionary moment that began the partnership between modern academia and the federal government. Until then, federal funds never came to academia. And it started this innovation called the R01, which is investigator-initiated approaches. It led to a lot. I mean, so a lot of different streams have come out of it. But today, when you look at the major problems confronting us and the opportunities available to us, that model on its own is not going to solve the problems. That model is still necessary. You're still going to require depth. You're still going to require disciplinary silos. You're still going to require all that for depth and development of methods. But the broader picture of integration today cuts across many boundaries. And so here, I'm trying to reflect in terms of what I see might the journey we might take towards 2035 is going to be one of cross-cutting, disease agnostic research around certain fundamental factors. And think about it. Let's think of the areas that I work in. Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, liver disease, then increasingly dementia. You could add HIV, you could add other diseases. And let's think together. In each one of them, we are looking at genomics, which is a common measurement. We are looking at the multiomics, which is either epigenomics or metabolomics, proteomics, lipidomics, fairly common measurements with some targeted, some untargeted, which can be done. But these are common infrastructures. Socio-behavioral factors, common infrastructures, common kind of measurements. And then increasingly, the other advantage we have, so this advance of molecular techniques is a great tool that is available to us now. And then also, tools available for more accurately measuring the exposome. Wearable technology to measure environmental factors, to measure lifestyle factors, wearable technology to measure continuous glucose monitoring, continuous blood pressure, you name it. So again, this wearable technology helps us to get more precise into earlier stages, studying vascular damage, studying all the various biomarkers. There's a certain commonality in terms of databases and platforms. And then given on top of it, we have imaging technologies. I mean, here we're trying to experiment with imaging to measure the islet cells of the pancreas structurally. I mean, that's the kind of power we have of measurement. And then you have the power of this vast amount of data, and we need to analyze it, and that's not going to lend itself to frequentist analysis. It really requires the power of computation, the power of bioinformatics, the power of machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. So when you take it together, many of the methods of research are going to be common across diseases. And yet, unfortunately, the biggest challenge is our organization. We are organized by discipline, by diseases. We recruit endocrinology fellows and cardiology fellows and kidney fellows. Maybe that's necessary for clinical application, but when it comes to science, maybe we require greater admixture of these people. And this is where I think is our challenge. And then both in terms of how we organize our research, I think we are not ready to take on this new frontier of integrated, interdisciplinary research. And training also lags behind. The institutional incentives lags behind for it. So we need to think radically about how we might do this in an evolutionary way without sacrificing the silos and the specialization and the depth. But how do we integrate across breadth? When I look at this room with every one of you, I find there is something that I can share. There's some integration that can happen. I was talking on the corridor. There are so many integrative ideas. And then the opportunity really is about grasping the moment of what's called convergence science. There was a National Academies report written about 10, 15 years ago on convergence science, which is a very passionate appeal that it's time that we saw research as an integrative approach where sciences in the broadest sense, humanities in the broadest sense, medicine in the broadest sense, and engineering in the broadest sense comes together. And each of this is going to be, you need to do it. So I think we should stop training people based on factual areas or based on disciplines or based on things. We have to train, people need depth in certain areas, but as a community, we have to be sensitive to other areas. And I don't think we train people that way. When I look at my own training, the work I do today has no resemblance to what I was trained for. Every day I'm learning something new and pivoting something new. I began with epidemiology and translation research. Now working with Al Powers, I'm learning bench research to understand islet cell biology. And I'm working with engineers to understand potential use of wearables. I'm working with computer scientists to understand how do you look at complex systems from an analytical perspective. So that's what I want to offer to you.
Thank you, Venkat. In fact, I think you went into a lot of questions we have later, but also I thought you were consulting an astrologer. You said something about Bayesian theorem there? Okay, all right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next part of our session, and that is the themed discussion with our panelists. And the first one we're going to go into is the research ecosystem and funding. And I'm going to be getting some help here with my co-vice chair here, associate vice chair, Charlie Searles. Charlie, were you supposed to start with the first question, or was I?
I think you were.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Our first question is, will the traditional NIH model still dominate in 10 years? That was our question. And Guido, in his very pessimistic manner, in his prediction, said no. And Guido, you said this model, which I think is absolutely beautiful, is that, and might be very true by 2035, is that this is going to be replaced by a model based on efficiency, quality, and teamwork. And there's a lot in each one of those words, right? That will operate through a diversified funding portfolio and in close strategic alignment with healthcare operations. Because there's a lot in there, I underline strategic alignment with healthcare operations and want to see what you have to tell us how Emory Healthcare, how can we align research with Emory Healthcare?
So let me clarify these thoughts, because I don't want to, make it perceived as doom and gloom. So my starting observation is really not about the disruption that's been brought in by the Trump administration, in terms of how NIH funding is being, administered in the past year or so. It really comes from observing the trends of science, where science is going. So the current model, and this requires a bit of being willing to think differently, and sometimes that creates discomfort. But the traditional model of NIH funding has been largely based on the idea of the PI, the principal investigator, and I've been one of them, right, for the past 25 years. So that individual pretty much runs an operation that, on the good side, there is a lot of freedom, a lot of ability to do your own planning, choosing people, choosing the line of research, all those things. But on the downside, there is the risk of isolation and the risk of sort of sacrificing the impact of your research because of the complexity of the problems that we are now dealing with. In a way, there was a world of lots of low-hanging fruits that could have been with relatively simpler, much simpler technology that could be picked up by small units of 3, 4, 5 people, with a PI, a postdoc, a technician, a student, and tackle these problems, again, relatively low level technology, at least, looking back, and low-hanging fruits, lots of things that we don't know, right? So that was a phase in science. Now we're entering, and I think, when you look at the main contributions that have been done, in different areas over the past, 5, 10, 15 years, you see a trend towards what people call big science, which I don't know if is a good or bad word, but the reality is that there are more and more, groundbreaking efforts that result from a pairing of large teams, putting together large teams with complementary expertise, working well together, and really, bringing it to the next level. So I think we have to ask ourselves the question, and I know Kristy has thought along those lines when in her previous version of herself in Texas, that, to what extent, this model of the PI should be the individual PI running their own, little empire with their own people, their own machines, their own space, their own projects, is conducive to producing science of the highest impact. And I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's time. The combination of where science is going as a trend and the disruption brought in by this administration at the level of federal funding, which is the main support of this individual PI model, should force us to start thinking a little bit different about the model, which doesn't mean destroying the PI system, but it means to figure out ways to make it more efficient, more coordinated, more open to real, team science approaches, more open to a level of efficiency that then, makes this high impact contributions more likely to happen. And in that context, I think, is when the alignment with healthcare operation becomes important, because this is the opportunity that we have, right? Our research has to benefit, has to, cross-leverage what we're doing on the healthcare side, and vice versa. Our healthcare side needs to cross-leverage and use, right, as a competitive advantage, as a differentiating factor, what we're doing on the academic, on the research side. So I think once we emphasize those points, you see that they can come together, right? This strategic alignment at the end of the day is based on those simple concept of quality, efficiency, teamwork. So we ought to start thinking, is the classical model of the individual PI with this somewhat rigid assignment of space, equipment, people, projects, RO1s, whatever that is, right? Is it the conduit to the best possible science that we can do, or can we start thinking about tweaking it and modifying it so that we increase the chances of being impactful? I think that's how I would like. I don't think it's a pessimistic
Oh,
thought.
not at all, Guido. And what's the word? I resent my word of pessimism, because I think what you're saying is absolutely the future, right? Because the future research success is going to hinge on strategic alliances between academia, industry, government, and communities, and that's what you're saying. You're saying instead of us just being NIH, this is what we need to do. We need to have strategic alliances. You're saying that partnership should move from transactional. We need funding to transformational. We need sharing, and that's what your message is there. And and I think last thing, which is very important, is that we have to serve as hubs of trust. Where what you said, the impact, our scientific impact, our scientific rigor has to meet the public need and the healthcare needs. So we and academic medical centers have to really align our academic mission and the clinical missions together, is what I hear from you.
Yeah.
And we are hoping that you as leader on the healthcare side are going to help us do that.
Absolutely, and I'll stop talking after this, but really our North Star, right? Our ultimate value should be, the impact of what we're doing, not the, and I don't want to say it in a bad way, but not the comfort that comes from doing things the way we've always done it. If the landscape changes significantly, we have to consider the possibility of changing the way we do things, if that is the best way to reach this impact that we all want, right? So that's, I'll stop.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you. So we've actually seen here in this meeting, the symposium, examples of team science that are successful here at Emory. The Rhythm project is a great example of this. But obviously we need to promote this further, and this is going to require infrastructure investments, or we suspect this will require infrastructure investments. And Dr. Marcus, you said in your opportunity statement that we want to create dynamic, or we should create, not we want to, but we should, dynamic data-driven ecosystems that integrate clinical data, AI modeling, multi-scale omics data, and molecular biology in the real time. Can you pick up a little bit on that and tell us how you would do that, I guess, or how we should do that?
Yeah, so I'm glad I went second, because it gave me some time to actually think about my answer here. First, big picture. So I kind of think about research maybe in a more systems approach. So in the sense that we're all some sort of integrated, interacting research community / network. And I think that approach could make us more adaptable, more dynamic, more flexible to respond to NIH needs, but also to be more innovative. And I think to do that, we talk a lot about top-down or bottom-up. We probably need some sort of like hybrid structure. I think the money comes top-down and the incentives come top-down to create that, but I think the science needs to come, from our faculty, from our investigators, and be driven in that way, because I feel like that's why a lot of us are here, is to be creative, to be innovative, and to drive new ideas and push the field forward. So I think if we start incentivizing those things and we start making those things happen, then we need to align the infrastructure around that. And maybe like I'll take a broad sort of idea that if we think about things like that, probably all of us in this room are thinking about, and we think about all the research we do, we're really from cells, to society, right? So we move in that direction. And can we essentially create, a pipeline, right? A research infrastructure pipeline that generates the data in a rapid way, in a translational way, that could then be integrated with, the thought leader who's next door, that maybe does computational modeling, et cetera, bring it to the community. And can we have these virtual pipelines in place? We have about 20, probably 30 plus core facilities, on campus that are large. Can we align these virtual pipelines along these core facilities that happen behind the scenes to move data quicker with that idea maybe of translational velocity? And I think we have pieces of this already there. I think we need to incentivize it. We need to continue to support it. We need to get people in the room to do it. Because ultimately it boils down to the wishes of our faculty, right? Like, we need to support the ideas you have. You're all thought leaders. And I think we need to sort of align the infrastructure and enable the science to happen in that way. And the reality is that that's going to take some dollars of investment. I mean, there's no question. But I think that, to me, is an opportunity. I think it happens in pieces and in some of these really strong teams as we become more matrixed in our science. I think a lot of these things take place. I'm sure there are a lot of team science talks this morning. But I think that will prepare us more, for the future and how we sort of think about science at Emory.
Thank you. Vibha.
Thank you. Adam, I do want to say that it appears that what you're saying is collaborative infrastructure investments are needed, because this is, while we all want to create this dynamic data-driven ecosystem, we know that it's extremely hard for us to bring these groups together, which are very diverse. Somebody's very busy clinically, somebody's very busy on their research side. So do we feel like there should be a momentum from all of us, from at every level, to try to do some sort of specific, not just letting the Brownian motion people collide, but actually making it more structured collisions?
Right, more intentional, right? So I think, my lab study is cooperation. So why cooperate is a question we always ask. And basically the consensus across all, across economics and cells is, it has to be a win-win. So if we make it in intentional collaboration, and that's great. We could say, here's $250,000 for a pilot grant. But when the assistant professor goes up for promotion, we need to ensure that team science is a win, right, for them, right? And it needs to be incentivized that, we're going to have multi-PI R01s, and that's a win for everybody. And not just for the contact PI. And I don't think that's true now, but we need to ensure that continues to happen, that it's a win-win for all groups. And then I think we all want to work together. Science becomes so esoteric in our fields, right? So you have to have other ideas of people to actually move things forward. I mean, Venkat was saying he's in areas that he never expected. I mean, same with me. My PhD was in plant biology. So I am absolutely in another area that I have never been in before. So it's, to me, that's the cool part of what we all do.
Thank you. So that brings us to our next question, which is, how will we stay competitive? We are seeing industry and AI transform research. Will academic medical centers still be the place where research happens? That was our question. And Venkat, you talked a little bit about that in your challenges when you said reorganizing the R&D environment, which is very important, in an efficient and nimble way. moving away, which you discussed a little bit, to more interdisciplinary approach and identifying plural sources of funding. But can you see what we should do in response to this challenge? Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Sure. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I can try. Again, a great book that I always remember is a book called Non-Zero, The Logic of Human Destiny. It kind of traces human history and actually argues that forces like wars, migration, natural disasters temporarily cause major disruption, major damage, which people react to, and naturally we should. But they also lay the foundation and the groundwork for new innovations and new changes to happen. So I want to pivot to you that what happened with COVID, what we are going through now, are probably events that is going to portend a science renaissance. I want to take that position. So what can we do now? We can either be reacting and be pessimistic, or we can prepare for a future and shape that future and stay ahead of that curve. I think that's what's going to give us competitive advantage, the mindset to do that. And what might we do? I mean, we've all heard that we require greater integration, but I think we should be careful not to make team science another religion, because we require depth so that certain disciplines, disciplinary focus, disease focus should remain. At the same time, where it is possible, can we create clusters? I mean, for example, I'd like to offer to you the Diabetes Center is a cluster. It's an interdisciplinary cluster. And the beauty is, one example, some year or something ago, I sat next to Alan Levy, just chatting about something, and suddenly when we whispered to each other, that led to the idea that our cohort, which is based on diabetes and cardiometabolic disease, had 17 years of follow-up, and if we could add brain measurements, the same exposure could be, it could relate to Alzheimer's and other dementias. We applied, we joined together, within 4 or 5 months, we submitted a grant, and we got $22 million for it. So I am learning a lot of dementia, and Alan is learning a lot of diabetes in the process. I think this is the kind, so the question is, at the level of Woodruff Health Sciences Center, we have a few major centers which are interdisciplinary centers. How do we seed them better? Can we create certain umbrella organizations that brings together common infrastructure? For example, the omic infrastructure, the wearable infrastructure, et cetera. Can we bring together the idea that these diseases are interrelated? I mean, as we speak, diabetes is related to so many of the other diseases, and vice versa. Vascular phenomena cuts across. So can we do something along those lines, and not to miss the fact that even pandemic, preparedness, responses to pandemic require these kind of approaches. So I think I would say cautiously move towards a model that creates larger platforms of infrastructure, creates a larger ecosystem of people working together, and incentivize part of people to work across disciplines. Yesterday, I was talking to the American Diabetes Association about their next postdoctoral grants, and one of the suggestions I said, why don't you fund 2 postdocs together as a team? They answer the same question. One does it from a basic science perspective, other from an epidemiology or a clinical trial perspective. So the idea is we need researchers who follow the question, and the method follows the question. So if your method takes you to the lab, go to the lab. If your method takes you to the population, go to the population. If your method takes you to sociology, go to sociology. So it's the question that should guide you, not your disciplinary attachment or your disease attachment.
Thank you, Venkat. Charlie?
So, Dr. Murray, we want to get you involved in this discussion. But so Dr. Narayan is proposing that, I don't know, are you proposing? I guess you're proposing. I mean, we have these centers. How do we leverage these centers? We have pediatrics. We have different departments. If we think about a possibility of reorganizing to make this vision happen, we picked up on your opportunity that we will identify novel approaches to solving problems and form new collaborations across disciplines. Can you comment a little bit more on these novel approaches?
And Kristy, we're very interesting, pediatrics being such a big partner of internal medicine.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Want to
And
hear your-
this is one thing. So as Guido had mentioned, I've been here for about a year and a half, and came from Texas, where we had a very different model, where it was, we had people not, this is the investigator, this is their startup package, these are their people, where it was very siloed. It was very opposite. It was like we had a floor, and I was director of the Center for Human Immunobiology, and I purposely, with my center, pulled together 32 faculty from 12 different disciplines, all focused around immune dysregulation. And so we had people focused in primary immune deficiencies, food allergy, cancer biology. I'm infectious diseases, so and really to study infectious diseases, we have to look at the immune system and how it responds. And I could learn so much from some of these other individuals who are more card-carrying immunologists. And bringing these people together from different disciplines was incredibly effective, but it also allowed us to be more efficient too in pulling together the resources that we needed to be in terms of our wet lab approach to interrogating our samples. So it was really nice. As I've been here now in the research, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a pediatric lens to things, but we have 13 centers, research centers within the pediatric research ecosystem. And looking at these centers, many of them are discipline-based, where it's like infectious diseases, cancer, CFAR, which is cystic fibrosis and airway diseases. So they focus primarily within those disease centers, but then we also have these integrative ones, which are clinical research, epidemiology, and clinical outcomes, genomics, et cetera. And what I want to do is really force those integrative centers to be much more active with the disease and discipline-based centers. And what we're doing is actually recalling them now catalyst as opposed to integrative, because I feel like that's what they're there for. You look at just where we've been over the last 5 and 10 years, and we're at an incredibly exciting point in medicine. We have so many tools now that, just even 5 years ago, I want to say COVID actually did us a favor by propelling us into the future in the way that we became innovative and developed out so many new technologies. But there's so much in our hands now to be able to move things forward, and we need to do this more in a transdiscipline way, where we can identify opportunities to collaborate. So one thing that I've been doing within our research ecosystem is kind of these forced collisions, where we're having centers collide with each other to bring them together, and I've been very strategic in the way that I've been wanting to do this. And then also too, going through and doing a deep dive, where do we have centers that are successful? Why are they successful? What is that metric that's there that's really driving the success? Then looking at some of our other centers that maybe aren't quite as successful, and why. Where do we have gaps? Where do we have some areas where we're not even focused, but in terms of our clinical priorities, we need to have alignment there. And so it's really been important to go through and go across the system, but bring people together that otherwise might not really think to work together, but they bring unique perspectives. One thing I'm doing too right now is creating co-directors within our centers. One thing that's very, very important to me is having somebody who's there who has that basic science perspective, but then pairing them with a clinical perspective leader, so they can bring together the two groups and have a two-way street where it's the clinicians are seeing problems, bringing it back and talking about these with our basic scientists, and vice versa, our basic scientists are having these incredible discoveries, and how can we then translate that into a clinical perspective? So trying to really bring together these individuals that need to be working together, need to be in the same room, and being able to make sure that they're effectively moving forward. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Kristy.
Thank you very much.
I think we'll move to our theme B, because that's very important to us, and then after that, we'll come back here to discuss this further with the audience, because I'm sure some of you have some points you want to make here or bring up. But let's quickly go to training and mentorship. Charlie was first one, yours? Yes.
Sure. Yeah. So in the in the context of our discussion today, I think some of you have brought up issues with or challenges, opportunities for training and mentorship in the future. Dr. Silvestri, you talked about the first and early entrance in the new post-Trumpian academic environment. We were just curious how you would see to prepare our trainees for this, to become these first and early entrants, to become successful in this. Is there some change in sort of strategy for training and mentorship that should be talked about?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, okay. Hopefully, yeah, you can hear me. I think this is another area where the world is changing, and it's not just the Trump administration. So one of the trends that I found most potentially disturbing in the way we do academic biomedical research is the progressive aging of the people getting their first, independent NIH grant, right? You have been, I see Roberto nods, but you look at the numbers from like 30 years ago to now has gone from like 35 to like 47 or something, and I'm making it up, but it's something around that range. So, and everybody will tell you that by the time you're 45, I hate to say it, but a lot of your creative potential as a scientist may be gone. So Mozart died at Mozart. I know you don't wanna hear that, but what I'm trying to say seriously is that we need to stop that trend. We need to stop the trend that people become ready to do science at age 45 or 50. We need to go back into when you use, quote unquote, use folks at age, 30, 35, 40, in the best possible way. So, and that's where I think a better way of doing team science and focusing in using our infrastructure, our resources in the best possible way will open up opportunities for the young scientists. And some of that will mean rearranging, training, the way we do training, and that's fine, we can think of that. But really, we gotta figure out ways to fully leverage the creative potential, the ability to do groundbreaking discoveries when people are young, and not keep pushing this moment, this entrance to the club of those who really decide what to do later and later and later. I honestly, I don't know. I mean, this is something that there's been a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, but I found it one of the most problematic trends in academic biomedical research. The age of the first R01 or the first R21, the way it has changed over the past 20 or 30 years. And that is, to me, is linked to what we should use this crisis potentially to reset that and figure out ways. And I don't know, it may be a new grant mechanism, it may be a new way to coordinate the efforts, so at the institutional level, so that people get their opportunities to shine earlier. But it's something that we need to take very, very seriously. And I think it intersects with all the other themes that we mentioned, other themes that we mentioned in this conversation, So again, we don't want to make team science a religion, like Venkat said, but we do want to make sure that a new way of being a young scientist in a team is, and Adam alluded to that, is rewarded and is given the opportunity to grow and shine. That right now we don't have. Right now we have this model, wait for, you need to get your R1 to be taken seriously, and to get the R01 now is no longer a 35, it's a 45 or 50. And in the meantime, you don't get promoted, so all the focus goes in that direction. The impact of science and what you're trying to do becomes a secondary endpoint. And these are all trends that we have the opportunity to revisit. And I think it would be the winners at the end of this crisis will be the ones that will be the first to create systems where those energies of the 30, 35, 40-year-old will be fully used and not sort of parked for a long time.
So does that strategy, does that change the career development award mechanism, or does that merge the career development award mechanism? Or
I think we need to...
Because there are people who do need those years of kind of mentor.
Right, so you need those years, but then, there's still, like, when the average of the first R1 is like 47 or something like that, right? There's something more than just a year of finishing your training, right? There's something more than was added, right? A neurosurgeon was a neurosurgeon 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but all of a sudden now that we had 10 years more, in getting their first grant. So I just think we need to be able to think creatively about what is the best way of facilitating those transitions. And it might be revisiting the type of grants that are funded, revisiting the institutional approach, making more intentional investment in the young scientists so that they have an opportunity to have resources and to shine and to create their networks. But we can continue to sort of accept, it is what it is, and people get their first R1 at 50, it was going to be 60 next. So I think this is a major opportunity for positive change.
Thank you, Guido, for making promising us that investment. I'm sorry. We made you say that. But I think, to your point, I'm reviewing K applications right now, and the average person is 3 years out of their fellowship who is writing these KO8s. We used to write KO8s in our second and third year of fellowship, and I'm making myself feel old by saying that. But when we write our Ks in the 3 years, 4 years after finishing fellowship, by the time we get the K in 1 or 2 cycles, to your point, Guido, you are not getting your R01 till you are in your, many years, like 10 years out, maybe out of your fellowship. So that brings us to our second, question, which was, and Kristy, this is your challenge. What do we need to do? You said it's a challenge to protect and sustain the next generation of researchers. Our question was, what do we do to protect and sustain the next generation of researchers? But I'm going to ask you specifically to comment on how do we protect their time? This is the protected time, which is the issue right now, right? So here's somebody out of their fellowship, 3 years is taking them to get their K. In that time of 3 years, if we don't protect their time, we are not going to keep them in the research pipeline. Right. We're going to lose them.
Right. And that's why I said what was important to me in that statement was about the sustain. This is one of the things that's been keeping me up at night and really does worry me. So if you want me to finally be a little bit more pessimistic. So I'm extremely worried about our next generation of researchers. The way we fund them is through NIH. We look at K awards, we look at T32s, we have K12s. Those are the ways that right now we do protect and pay for that time. I'm extremely worried. Our diversity supplements, this is usually a way for us to be able to help propel a person's career forward. What's going to happen if there are reductions to the NIH budget? We are so reliant on NIH to be able to fund these early career researchers. And that's what worries me. I worry that people, one, what impact it's going to be to academic medicine, because these individuals are going to go into industry because there's better protection. They're going to have more of a likelihood of success and have a job. And I think that's what people are really worried about, if they're going to have a job or not. So how can we protect that, and how are we going to sustain it? I'm on a National Academy of Medicine committee right now, and we've been going through deep dive into the data at NIH. And the one thing that's also a little sobering when we think about early career, especially people who are in their first few years of their academic position as a faculty member, is that what we have for the K award mechanism isn't enough. So you have to have an institution commitment of usually at least $1 million to be able to support that individual through startup money, through being able to protect their time until it takes them, 2-3 years, sometimes more, to get that K. once they finally get the K, then you have 5 years of support. And with that 5 years of support, you're expected to cover their salary above, usually it's about $100,000. We went through all the K award data. So it's a huge financial commitment on the part of the institution. And if institutions are being now threatened as well in terms of funding, and we're having to reduce everything we can in terms of being able to just keep jobs, then what is going to happen? I have a feeling these are the individuals that are going to end up with the short end of the stick, and it really worries me. So what are opportunities? What are ways that we can protect and sustain that pipeline so that we can ensure a pathway to success for these individuals? And so one of the things that I'm focused on at this moment is working and partnering with our foundations and our donors. We've been doing different donor events to try and see if there's ways that we can create some of these assistant professorships, ways to be able to bring in money where it creates an endowment to sustain and perpetually support that salary that's needed to protect their time and be able to help move them forward. But we've got to get creative. We've got to be able to figure out something outside of NIH as a way to support these individuals, knowing that we have no idea if NIH is even going to be able to do this in the future or not. So that's those are the things that are keeping me up more at night. And something that's always been just a huge passion of mine is making sure that the future of science, the future of medicine is sound and protected and strong. So,
Thank you, Kristy.
yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, we wanted to talk with Dr. Narayan, kind of changing the theme here a little bit, but still in the same theme of training and mentorship. So from the mentorship side, given your proposed agnostic research approach, do we need to have change in our preparation of our mentors? Does there need to be, and how would we do that?
Yeah, before I directly answer that question, let me share another idea that as we train young people to develop a research portfolio, a kind of analogy might be like an investment portfolio. So they need in their portfolio something that is very low risk, like a CD, something like a little higher risk, like regular blue chip stocks. But there's also a place for startup stocks and for global stocks. So, and depending on the risk tolerance, they align their portfolios, and we have to incentivize different people differently. Otherwise, there's a huge risk of people going into very low risk, safe research, which might get you your immediate NIH grants and get you your career progression, but which is not going to do the paradigm shifts in the field. So I think we need to somehow create this culture of allowing greater risk for people who are ready to take the risk and mentor them appropriately, number one. Your question is how we break these disease silos and disciplinary silos. I think, yes, mentorship is very, very important for that. But I think, when you look at it, the groups across Emory that do it has a lot to do with the champions, for the different clusters who have led it. It hasn't happened because of institutional initiatives. It has happened because of individuals who are driven and who have taken on that position. So that model is fine. It takes you to a point. But if you want scaling of that method, then I think you need action at 4 different levels. At the level of the trainee and the mentor, I think we need some level of, we need to expand the definition of mentorship. I mean, for example, this is one reason why when young trainees come to me, I try to create some discomfort. If you want to focus on diabetes, also think of one more disease, for example, where there's a relationship. If you want to be a geneticist, think of think of how society might interact with the genes. Okay, so you want to create that discomfort and try to pair them up during doctoral education or postdoctoral education with that sort of thing. And the larger ecosystem that you're creating in a center or a program should kind of breed that kind of ethos. I mean, it's good to have, like yesterday, Shari Barkin spoke to us. She spoke about complex systems, and there were pediatricians, there were endocrinologists, there were cardiologists, there were sociologists, molecular biologists. So when you ask the right questions, things come out. And the other thing which I learned from, David and others is creating things like blue skies groups. I mean, say, for example, you want to create tension between how do I apply AI to diabetes, or what is the connection between diabetes and cancer? Let's have an evening together, 2 hours, invite faculty on both sides, give a 5-minute bullet presentation, and let people mix, and things happen out of it. And then finally, at the institutional level, we have the Woodruff Health Sciences Center. And let me ask you a question. How many in this audience are from the School of Public Health? Okay. How many from School of Nursing? How many from Georgia Tech? How many from the college? I think this is where the problem is. So we have created institutional barriers. People like David and Carlos do a great job in the School of Medicine, but still you're not able to break down the barriers. Was there an intentional effort to reach out to these people and bring them in? I think that's another thing we need to do at the level of the institution. And we need to relocate resources towards these kind of areas in addition to just letting a laissez-faire approach exist.
Thank you, Venkat. We have a question for Adam, but I think Adam sort of discussed that when he talked about metrics. So I'm going to open it up to our audience and for a question for Dr. Marcus. So let's get the mics out and let's see if we can now go on to our discussion with question and answer session. So we have a question there. So Adam, I'm going to let you take an audience question rather than my question.
Yeah, I had my answer prepared.
You had the answer prepared. That's why I did that. David has a question.
So I thank the panel for the great discussion. My question really is about the assault on science, because I think we are experiencing a unprecedented assault on science. And how we address that, we're in a scientific bubble to some degree, and I think the discussion was a bit of a bubble around the bubble. But we have this assault on science. The Venkat raised the important point about how all this was created. Post-World War II, there was an initiative, and there was a great belief in science in our society. The question is, that's changed. It's now anecdote. It's now driven by disinformation. How can we address that really important issue in this broader context and seeing what the vision is in 10 years, as opposed to thinking only in our scientific bubble?
Shot at that, and it's nobody wants to do it. That's for you. Yeah, it was to me. Okay, right. Okay, I think firstly, even when you look at data, there is still a lot of trust in science and scientists, and it's about 70% of the American public still trust science and scientists. Number one, and secondly, we should also ask ourselves a question: have we, as scientists, missed something? And I think this is where a book that again touched me deeply was Carl Sagan's A Demon-Haunted World, in which he clearly argues that we are creating a society that is structured on science, but we have forgotten to educate the masses and the population about science. So I think we scientists have remained isolated. And I think this is where public communication of science is extremely important. I keep arguing that in addition to your science going out in your journals, there needs to be simple 3 points which anybody with any intelligence or even without that can understand what you're trying to say. I think we need to create that second level of communication. And thirdly, as a university, we pay attention to the K awardees. Maybe there is time to start bringing in high school kids into our labs and educating them and bringing up. I think all of this is going to be important. And I do believe that this attack on science is, in some part of it will stay, the damage will stay, but there will also be a recovery from it. It's a matter of time.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody handed me a mic. Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Please, Carlos. Go ahead. All right. So I appreciated the framing that you brought up right at the beginning, which was, will we look back in 10 years and 15 years and feel like we've done the right thing? And I also appreciate the optimism around the hurricane scenario that you sort of, and I heard several analogies to what we're facing. I heard war, I heard hurricane, I heard corporate restructuring. All of those things sort of assume a significant amount of damage, right? And at some level, I think all of us understand that damage has come and is coming. But I do want to ask the panel to consider what the obligation of an institute like Emory is in pushing back on that kind of damage, because we know that damage right now is asymmetric, right? It's coming for marginalized communities. It's coming for areas of science that we as an institution believe are important. And can we consider ourselves an institution that serves those communities if we are not vocally and publicly pushing back on those things? I appreciated, Dr. Silvestri, your discussion around academic freedom, and I think we would all agree that academic freedom underpins all of the things that you gentlemen have spoken about and is absolutely necessary. Can we consider ourselves an institution that is supportive of academic freedom if we are not aggressively pushing back on grant cancellations and are willing to fire faculty members outside of an open expression policy that's trying to protect exactly those things? So I do wonder what your thoughts are on an institute as powerful as Emory and as important to healthcare in the state of Georgia as Emory. What is our obligation to the outside community and also to our own internal people as we are being attacked, as that damage becomes more and more inevitable? So, thank you.
Okay.
I'll take it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you want to take it?
Sure. And I sincerely appreciate what you said too, because it is important. And I think we have to be realistic that there is damage that has happened and it's continuing to happen. And I agree with you in terms of the academic freedom model and how we have to stay true to what we do and what we believe. And doing the right thing. That's, as we were getting a lot of these terminations and having incredibly upset faculty, this is their career, this is their passion, this is their dedication, and feeling that it's politicized. And that's what we have to kind of separate ourselves from. It's like we have to stay focused on what's important and what has the greatest impact to child health and to public health in general. How can we stay focused and let that just be noise around us and just stay true to what we know is the right thing to do? Because the reality is that's what we need. We need to hold close, tight to our integrity and to our passion and our knowledge. I mean, Emory is a strong institution. It's full of brilliant, brilliant scientists. I can't tell you how impressed I am with all the faculty that I meet and everything that they do to contribute to the way that we move forward. So I think that we have to, again, this is when we come together so much as a community. There's going to be damage. There's a lot of damage. And it's not just people losing grant funding. It's psychological damage as well of what's happening. I started my career at CDC, and it is so hard to see what's happening across the street from us right now. And it is a full-on attack on what we do and what we believe in. So I think we just have to stay true and stay solid with our goal. I love your thought. I hosted a gaggle of middle schoolers yesterday. So I say even going beyond high school, let's go back to middle school. Do what we can to really encourage people to continue down and go into science, go into medicine, and be able to move forward. Because I am worried about what's going to happen if people are going to drop off because of so much of being what's politicized. And I think this goes to what you were saying too, David. We have to be really careful with where we go and pull together. And I think Guido.
Thank you, Kristy. Sorry. I think Carlos had something to add to us.
So I have a question this has been really a very good discussion. One of the arguments that you hear from Jay Parashara and others at the NIH as well, the NIH budget has grown, and research has gone up life expectancy has gone down. There's an absolute disconnect between all the advances and really the impact that those advances are having on the life of Americans and on the life expectancy of Americans. And you would say that the health of Americans has deteriorated over the years. So how do we ensure that there is that connectivity? And again, we talked about translational research, but if you hear Jay, he's really talking about we need more implementation science. We need that science. So again, I go back to we have a healthcare system here. I really think we need, I mean, the National Academy of Medicine came up with a concept some years ago of the learning health system. You know, how do we get that health system to really get better because of research? And, you know, frequently we as researchers are like, oh, the health system is an impediment, you know, we can't work in there, they make things slow. I would love to sit all the leaders of the healthcare system and say, with a bunch of researchers and say, okay, tell us one problem that you have that research can help you fix. And then we work with them in fixing those issues, and then we actually are improving, you know, how the system works, how it's more patient-friendly, how it works to improve the health of Americans. I think we need to make that connection in order to let the people know that Emory, I mean, when you talk to the general public about Emory, he said, yeah, it's a great institution, but I can't get into Emory Healthcare and they can't see me. Well, the place is broken. Well, that's our problem. It's not Emory Healthcare's problem. It's our problem as faculty, as researchers, that we haven't focused on that issue. So what do we need to do to better integrate our research with the health systems that work with us?
Guido, you want to take that?
Thank you, Carlos. That will require another hour to go over.
Yeah,
You know,
we'll be
I'm
around
working
time
on
though, yes.
some documents, but yeah, I mean, there's another question there, maybe. Yeah, you're right, Carlos, but you know that will require, you know, like hours of discussions on to promote that integration. But it's a major goal. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you
We have
to the
one more
panel.
time for one more question, and I know you've been patiently waiting. Thank you.
No, thank you. First, thanks to the panelists. It was very important to listen to all of you, and I think my takeaway from that is two major issues or sort of theme to discuss, which is how do we do great science moving forward, and also what are the big challenges in science today and for the future. I would like to stress a little bit the challenging part, and I cannot agree more with Matt, what he said, right? So I have an understanding of what is happening and what we might envision. What am I missing? And I'm asking as a sort of like next generation, somebody that is trying to move forward with the path to the science, to be independent, but also for any student or anybody that wants to contribute, right? And I would like to bring it to the present. We talked about the past, we look forward to the future, but we haven't really talked about what the present is. And beside the optimism, what we should carry with us is how do we take action? So I'll try to be maybe a little bit more clear on what Matt was trying to suggest. And to me, it seems that we have been trying to be safe, like keep a safe space, and I do understand that, but it's also like to be a little bit submissive, because when we hear that science is attacked in a way that makes no logic and no sense, and I think beside political parts, we all can agree that it just makes no sense. To me, what is missing is like the knowledge, and to get from somebody that is more senior and more wise, the real action. So what can I do in my day life as a group, as a single person, to change that, to shift? Is NIH crashing? How do we fix that? Because NIH is government, but is also scientists, right? So we need that. And if that is not working, how do we move to something that we can make work? How can we be creative? Where is the creation in that? So I'm really missing the action nowadays to make sure that my future and everybody else can be something that is in the reality of being positive. So I don't know if you can speak to that. It's advice. I know that you don't have the solution. I hope somebody...
But you predicted our next question, even though I don't know if we're going to have time to go through that, which was to ask each panelist to give us advice for a junior investigator preparing for 2035, and that's, I think, what you're saying. So can we have one-line advice, one line?
One-line advice, stick to your passion, be focused, there's noise outside, but get going, with the focus and control things that you can control, and isolate yourself from things that you can't control.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say innovation and impact come to mind. I mean, I always think about, I always tell people in my lab, we need to be creating the field. We need to be leading the field. Like, we can't just be playing catch up. So I think, creating your path forward is critical. Being an advocate, I think, is critical. And, I think always, I'll talk a little bit about this before, is how we define impact. Impact is absolutely trials. Learning healthcare system sounds like what you were saying, Carlos. Policy changes, but also how impact is advancing the field. How have you advanced the field in basic sciences? How have you discovered new mechanisms? That's all about innovation and impact. So, I don't know, those are the two things that are always on top of my mind, junior or senior investigators. And I don't know, that's been important to me. So,
Kristy, your one-liner, please.
I only get one line? I only get one? Because I feel so much like I want to respond to what you're asking and saying. Because the reality is that I know the perception might be that we're not doing things and we're playing things safe. But the reality is that there's a whole force of us behind the scenes doing a lot of work up in DC right now and on the Hill, moving things forward because we understand and we're doing everything we can to move things. So I'm sorry that the perception is that we're playing things safe, because there really is a lot of behind the scenes work that's happening right now to do everything we can to protect. That's why we got a lot of terminations rescinded and reversed. There have been many ways that we've been able to move that needle and make the damage less worse than it is. So, but I think in terms of advice, it's just staying focused. Like what Narayan said, just stay away from the noise. Don't let the noise dissuade you. Do everything you can to just continue staying focused on that end goal. We're at an incredibly exciting time in science right now, like I said, with the amount of technology that we have at our fingertips. And so I think that this is a great time to be moving in and let that noise just be noise. There's a lot of us here that are going to do everything we can to have your back and make sure that you can be successful.
Work as hard as you can, be ambitious, focus on impact, create teams, work in teams, and don't be afraid of diversifying your sources of funding, because we might have to do that for a while.
Thank you, everyone. I think we can't thank you enough for being here, for sharing your thoughts, for giving us your time. And I'm sorry, I know I put everybody on the spot here quite a bit. I want to stop by one last slide. And I put this slide up 2 years ago on Research Day, when we talked about my favorite word, convergent science, which thank you for bringing that up, because I think this is very exciting times for us. I want to take away some of that idea which we were talking about. I know we might feel like under assault, but it's also, we know that academic medical centers have been having a hard time balancing the three missions. But the way to balance and to make the impact on human health, which is what we are trying to do, which is what we want the community to know, that if they want the impact on human health, they should not be going to Meta. They should be coming to us, because we're going to focus on everything while they will focus on what's going to give them the profit, right? But what we need to bring is the two pillars of convergent science and accelerated clinical translation, which we at Emory are in a great position. I put this 2023 when I came to Emory and said, Emory is in the best place to do that, because we've got the excellent healthcare system and we got amazing STEM technologies around us, and it's our job to put that together. And I think if we do that, we're in a very exciting time. We might be solving problems which would have taken, it took me 8 years of finding a cell by making a specific transgenic mouse, and that one single cell sequencing experiment gave me the results, right? So these are very exciting times in many ways. So I want to end this with optimism and say, we have to be prepared, because that's what we need to do. We need to be prepared for the future. But at the same time, these are exciting times for science. This is a time for us to make impact. So I hope you carry that home with you, especially the younger ones. Thank you.